Story Sanctuary, a visionary fiction story by Skywalker Payne. 1. Journey to the North Land. The ocean called to Sehene Claire. She knew she had to cross the ocean to get to the North Land and find the story holder. The Lawsons didn't have a boat. For them, the ocean was a place for recreation and the source of the rivers that irrigated their land. No matter how many times Ben explained it to her, she couldn't understand how the salty sea became the fresh water of the rivers flowing into their fields. But she had tasted both waters. The ocean had a deep, sweet, salty taste she loved to float over her tongue and allow a little to flow into her stomach. The river water was warm and sunny to her tongue, and a salve to her throat and stomach. As soon as she recovered her strength and her leg was totally healed, Sehene Claire told the Lawsons she had to leave. She knew her destiny was in the far north lands, as she also knew she was not a farmer. But she did work the fields, listened, and waited. The Lawsons wanted Sehene Claire to stay with them. Her intelligence, ingenuity, and gifts amazed them. Todd told her she was beautiful all the way through. Her pale skin quickly bloomed into a golden bronze beneath the sun's rays. Her long, thick locks fell below her waist. With lean, slim limbs, she moved with strength and grace. Her large, blue-green eyes changed in the light, in the sea, with her emotions. She found the young men Paula and Ben introduced her to when they went to the market centers immature. Sehene Claire knew she was older than the Lawsons, but with sanctuary, not measuring time, she didn't know her age in their terms. Knowledge of living and people told her, though, she was much older than she looked. Knowledge was all Sehene Claire sought. One day, as she swam in the ocean, she heard people talking about going to the North Land after they stocked up on supplies. She swam to the surface and looked around. Near the horizon, she saw a large ship, its sails taut in the wind. It was a fishing ship, heading to Matanuska Sasutna, some called Seaward Success, the gateway into the Northland. Her first impulse was to swim to the boat and tell the captain she wanted to join his crew, but she didn't know anything about catching fish in the deep waters. She continued listening carefully and heard someone say the cook was sick and they needed to find a substitute. Now she had a key. Sehene Claire didn't tell anyone she could hear conversations from great distances. It was a gift she inherited, and her grandmother taught her how to cultivate and to control her hearing, so she didn't get overwhelmed by hearing too much. Sehene Claire accompanied the Lawsons to buy fish. She carried a bag with a few clothes and the determination to become the ship's cook. She placed her intention in her mind, as taught by Grandmother Therese, to achieve her goal. As soon as they got on board the ship, Sehene Claire saw the flyer, "Cook wanted, applicants go to kitchen." She pulled the paper from the wall and walked straight to the kitchen. "My name is Sehene Claire, and I'm your cook." A large man with skin dark as fertile earth looked into Sehene Claire's eyes and saw a determination he'd never seen before. He extended his hand as he took the flyer from Sehene Claire and said, "I'm Devon Hill, first mate, and you are our new cook. Let me show you to your quarters. If you got anyone to say goodbye to, best do it now. After you put your rags in your quarters, you've got work to do, Miss Sehene Claire." She smiled broadly as she shook his hand. Solar panels and sails with wind turbines powered the ship. When it was not stopped or slowing to fish, the boat spread through the water so swiftly it kicked up waves. Preparing 3 meals a day for a crew of 50 kept Sehene Claire busy from sunrise to nighttime. But the captain and crew were easygoing and took turns helping out with the dishes, and some even prepared their favorite foods she didn't know how to cook. Sehene Claire kept to herself, not talking about herself because she wanted to learn as much as she could about the Northland and how to find the story holder. She was used to hearing other people's conversations at a distance and had managed well for years. But since being on the ship, she began to feel overwhelmed with conversations she seemed unable to block out. After a while, she understood she was not only hearing conversations, she was hearing thoughts. While carrying a bowl of soup stock from the refrigerator to the pot on the stove was the first time she became fully aware she was hearing a thought and not a conversation. "That girl has a fine ass. I'd love to rest old Roger right between those warm cheeks." The bowl fell from her hands. Thin stock flowed over the floor. Jared, the young man whose thought caused the accident, rushed over with a mop before Sehene Claire said a word. "Yep, that's why we get everything in here made of stainless steel. Captain told me when I first started helping out in the kitchen. Spent too much money replacing glass and porcelain bowls and dishes. Don't worry, cook. I'll take care of this." "Thanks," Sehene Claire said as she quickly looked into the deep blue eyes of the smiling young man. She didn't smile back as she picked up the bowl and placed it in the sink of sudsy water. He'd see a smile as an invitation to pursue his thoughts. She didn't have time. True, he was attractive, but not as attractive as Mage. A cold sharpness hit the center of her chest as Mage's smiling face came into her mind's eye, and she smiled even as tears welled in her eyes. She hadn't thought of Mage for months. Now, as she quickly brushed the tears off her face, she knew why. "I'll be back in a few minutes and start the soup," she said as she quickly walked past Jared and ran to the bathroom. Tears flooded from her eyes as she sank to the floor. The pure, loving kindness and concern of the Lawson family was a hive of protection and familial love absent on this huge ship of narcissistic egomaniacs, each one, male and female, trying to outdo the other. Her body shook as tears fell until a soothing fatigue rolled over her, and Grandmother Therese stood before her. Her warm hand gently wiped the tears from Sehene Claire's face. "Oh, my darling anointed one, so long you resisted accepting your path. You thought sanctuary would keep you from the light, but you see light. You've seen it since you sat in my lap as a little girl and didn't know how to tell even me. And now, just as I told you when I taught you how to limit the conversations you hear, you know you're hearing thoughts. You were able to hear thoughts in sanctuary, but it was easier for you to dismiss them as your own thoughts because you were so close to so many people. Here, you're like an alien from another planet. These people have not spent even a few hours in conscious sitting compared to the years of sitting in silence everyone in sanctuary did. Yes, sanctuary is gone. You didn't want to accept the truth that it would end when I told you just before I ascended. It had to end. All of that mental and spiritual energy could not remain underground. Yes, it was selfish and short-sighted of the leaders to think it served the best interest of the earth and the residents of sanctuary to enshrine such energy, wisdom, and compassion in one underground place. Of all the many wise decisions made, that one was wrong. Our energy did not flow up to the surface. We were not gods or saints, maybe bodhisattvas, but our compassion and wisdom benefited only the few thousand beings living in sanctuary. Grandmother Therese sat on the floor and wrapped her arms around Sehene Claire as she did when she was a little girl, stroking her hair. You're not the only one who survived the earthquake. Mother Earth planted the seeds of sanctuary's wisdom and compassion all over the world, particularly in the places we're most needed. You received your mission clearly, and keep it close to you. Gently, her grandmother kissed Sehene Claire's third eye and stood up. Their sea blue-green eyes met, and a warm smile flowed through Sehene Claire with the soothing comfort of the Pacific waters. Have no fear. Do not be sad. You and Mage will have your day. Even though she could no longer see her grandmother, her presence was palpable in Sehene Claire's heart and mind. She remembered now that Grandmother Therese told her this day would arrive. She told her the world and life she knew would be gone, and the impossible would be true. Life on the surface of the earth. Sehene Claire smiled as she stood up, walked to the mirror, and splashed water on her face. Her eyes looked at her reflection and saw her grandmother's eyes. She smiled. Grandmother Therese told her when she heard the thoughts of others, she was gaining strength to accomplish her mission and her life work. For the rest of the journey to Seward, Sehene Claire worked on remembering the advice and guidance she'd received from Grandmama Therese. By the time the boat pulled into the harbor, she could protect her mind from receiving unwanted thoughts and conversations, most of what occurred on the ship. As she shook hands with the captain and crew on her departure, she felt a sense of accomplishment and new strength. Even though almost every man and woman expressed in one way or another a desire to get close to her physically or sexually, she managed to change their thoughts to seeing her simply as a kind, considerate, and concerned cook. The captain's rough brown hands held hers as his large brown eyes met hers. Anytime you want to join us, you're welcome. I don't care if we've hired another cook. If you want to join us, you're always welcome. You've brought us not only good food, but a sense of order and peace no other cook's given. I wish you success in your travels.